When you hear the term collaboration, what comes to mind? Synergy? 1 plus 1 equals 3. Or maybe the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And yes, collaboration done right can translate into improved results, better efficiency, and higher morale. But let's be honest, when it's done poorly, it can be an unmitigated disaster. The truth is that real collaboration is so much more than just throwing people in a room together or slapping a few names on an org chart and just hoping for the best. Teams that collaborate effectively have taken very specific steps that create a structure and environment that supports effective collaboration. In this course, we'll share those specific techniques and approaches designed to help teams work together more efficiently and effectively. And we'll identify very practical approaches that you can use with your team. I'm Dana Brownlee, president of Professionalism Matters. I'm a corporate trainer, keynote speaker, and author of The Unwritten Rules of Managing Up. And one thing that I've learned after more than 15 years of training teams is that effective collaboration doesn't happen by accident. Instead, it takes intention, skill, and a few secrets to success. Are you ready to learn those secrets? Let's go. Even if you're not officially part of a team, you typically do need to collaborate with others to be successful. This course is actually a great example. Yes, I have expertise and experience that will form the basis of the content, but I can't produce a professional quality video without collaborating with others. Let's explore reasons why collaboration is so important. Collaboration allows you to leverage other people's expertise. No matter how brilliant you think you are, there are other people who have deeper experience or different skills. As an instructor, I'm reliant on producers, AV experts, or designers to provide you the best finished product. I just don't have those skills. Collaboration also provides cross-training opportunities. As I work with other subject matter experts, some of that expertise invariably rubs off on me, and that's tremendously valuable. So if the AV guy couldn't make it one day, now I may be able to step in and handle my own audiovisual needs. I will never learn those skills, though, if I'm not collaborating. Collaboration also supports better problem solving. As individuals, we tend to approach problems only from our point of view, and that can be really dangerous. I heard a story one time about a brand of hot sauce that was trying to come up with innovative ideas about how to increase revenue. Most of the ideas involve complicated marketing strategies designed to get users to use hot sauce on a wider range of foods. But there was an intern who showed up to one of the meetings, and he said to the group, well, hey guys, every time I'm using the product, you don't have to shake the bottle so hard. Why don't we just make the hole bigger? Then everybody looked around and thought, why didn't we think of that? Also, collaboration just makes work more fun. When teams work together to produce something amazing, it's a bonding experience that builds strong connections within the team and improves morale overall. You can probably right now identify people that you're close to as a result of having worked with them on a project years ago. And finally, the number one reason to collaborate is that it typically produces a better product. One of my favorite team building activities is one where participants are given a disaster scenario. Then they're asked to rank their materials in order of importance to represent their survival strategy. They then complete the same activity, but this time in teams. Most of the time, teams perform better than individuals. And with this particular activity, they can actually measure their level of synergy. And this synergy is what highly collaborative teams experience in the workplace every day. As the African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Building a team is a lot like building a house. It needs a really strong foundation. One of the best ways that teams can ensure they have a solid foundation is by answering the 6 basic questions of who, what, why, where, when, and how. Too often, teams just jump into doing the work without making sure their team has defined its key parameters. Taking just 1 or 2 meetings to clarify these 6 questions forces your team to set boundaries, define expectations, and most importantly, identify potential areas of disagreement sooner rather than later. Let's consider an example. Say you're a project team working together to develop a new content management system for your media company. Here's an example of what some of your discussion output might look like. The 6 questions provide a broad guide to ensure you're covering your bases. You should define key decisions and also include any lingering questions. Invariably, you may not reach agreement on everything during the first discussion, and that's completely fine. Just keep track of any issues and address them as the team's discussions progress. Huge warning though, this is not one of those obligatory exercises where you just want to check the box. No, you really want to dig into some of these discussions. The value here is in the process itself, the discussion, the journey, not the destination. The goal isn't to have some shiny deliverable at the end or a completion certificate that you're going to hang on the wall. So make sure you approach these discussions with that mindset. For example, if some team members seem to love video chat, while others never turn on their camera, you really want to dig into that to better understand individual preferences and style differences. Or if some team members seem to prioritize customer interactions while others avoid them, that might be an indication that there are different interpretations of the team's goals and priorities. You want to better understand that. If part of your team expects to work from home while others really seem to value in-person meetings, you want to clarify expectations early. You get the picture. This is a really simple framework that gently reminds the team to cover the basics that will establish a foundation for strong collaboration. Just like a sports team, a workplace team can't collaborate effectively without the right players. As you're setting your foundation for strong collaboration, the first question to consider is who. As Jim Collins said in Good to Great, you've got to get the wrong people off the bus, the right people on the bus, and make sure the right people are in the right seats first. Essentially, you want to first analyze your resources to be sure you have a strong team. Here are some of the types of questions you may want to ask. Do team members have the right skill sets and experience? What about authority level? Do we have a decision maker on the team, and do we need one? You may even want to use a whiteboard to think this through. Here's an example of what your analysis might look like. You'll also want to ask questions like, do team members have the right availability? Does the team possess the diversity that we'll need to be successful? Do team members have complementary work styles? Have they worked together previously? Or do they even get along? I remember working as a strategy consultant years ago on a technical project that literally came to a halt because 2 people on the team couldn't stand each other. We had to stop the project midway and literally have an intervention with them. But had we taken the time to think through this before the project started, we would have saved precious time by factoring this into our resource selection. Now, the truth is that oftentimes we can't pick our teammates. True. But you can still take some time at the beginning to assess your resource gaps and work to close them. Maybe you can negotiate some part-time support from an intern with SharePoint experience, or you might pursue some training for a particular team member to address a skill gap, or even decide to outsource a few tasks when you're anticipating being particularly resource constrained. The key is that you want to identify your blind spots sooner rather than later. Think back to some of your worst, most chaotic team collaboration experiences. Why were they dysfunctional? It just might have been a lack of clarity on the what, the goals and tasks, and the why, the mission, or as I like to say, the so what, that makes people care about the goals and tasks. For me, one of my worst team experiences was while I was working on a project with a media client. We were preparing for a key milestone meeting with our client, and one of our newer team members was charged with leading the session. During our preparation, it became clear that she had a very different vision for the session than others on the team. And while we discussed the different views, we never really reached agreement on our goals or ultimate vision for the session. And guess what? It was a complete disaster. The client was asking us questions that we couldn't answer because we weren't in sync as a team. The net result was an embarrassing client experience, which ultimately diminished our credibility with them. The takeaway? Your team needs clarity on the what and the why to be focused and ultimately to be successful. If you're shaking your head, yes, and saying that makes sense, but wondering, well, how do we do that? Here's a quick technique. Give each person on the team a card and ask them to write their understanding of the team's goals on one side and the team's mission on the other. Then collect the cards and read the responses one by one, noting the overall similarities and differences. Be prepared though. You may be shocked by the range of differences. Some will probably list items that aren't in scope. And that's great because now you can clarify the scope of the team's work. On the other hand, you may be pleasantly surprised that everyone is on the same page. Either way, this quick check-in is a simple and easy way to prevent problems down the road. Now, most teams skip this step and they pay the price weeks or months later when they're having to address conflict, resolve problems, or redo tasks. Do not make that mistake. Clarify your team's what and why early on. Our final 3 questions to set the stage for effective collaboration are where, when, and how. With where, we want to consider things like, where will we work? What about remote employees or satellite locations? I've got one client who has had so many problems because meetings were scheduled at headquarters where parking is so bad that half the team ends up being 10 to 15 minutes late for virtually every meeting. It's a small thing that can turn into a big thing when your team doesn't discuss these issues at the beginning. For when, you might ask questions like, when are our working hours? Do we have time zone issues to consider? How often do we meet? What are the team's key deliverables and timelines? For example, if the team is responsible for producing a weekly company newsletter, it's important to discuss timing of handoffs very specifically before things start falling through the cracks. Finally, be sure to discuss how your team will work together. This is what I like to call the silent killer. It's so much easier to focus on more obvious planning questions like, what are our goals and tasks? But the what won't happen by osmosis. And it won't necessarily happen efficiently. So you want to spell out the how to make sure you've developed processes that are efficient and effective. When the team doesn't take time early on to clarify how they'll work together, everybody just uses their own preferred method. Some may come into the office voluntarily for team meetings, while others may just call in from home. Some may send status updates with tons of detail, while others just assume they can just text the team if there's a problem. If you're struggling to figure out what your team should define here, think about problems that you've encountered collaborating in the past and ask your team to address those issues proactively. You will be so glad you did. One of the best techniques to set yourself or your team up for effective collaboration is developing a set of ground rules. So here are 4 steps for developing ground rules that work whether you're the team leader or a team member. Step 1, explain why the ground rules are important in the first place. I usually say something like this: guys, I really appreciate everyone's participation on this team. We've all been on those dysfunctional teams, and I do not want this to be one of those experiences. Our success will hinge on our ability to collaborate effectively, so it's worth it to take just a little bit of time to decide how we want to work together. Step 2, give each person a pad of Post-its and a marker. And then ask them to reflect on some of their best and worst team experiences and write down just one ground rule that they think will help the team collaborate effectively. Step 3, after a few minutes, collect those Post-its and review each one with the full team. Here are a few examples of what you might get. Someone might write, start and end our meetings on time. Someone else might write, we need to avoid that back and forth email volleyball. Or you might get, no conference calls after 2 o'clock on Fridays. Remember, they shouldn't always feel restrictive. They should reflect the personality of the group. In fact, I had a team one time whose ground rule was, any meetings longer than 2 hours must have food. I promise you, everybody loved that ground rule. And finally, step 4, take a vote on each ground rule and only adopt the ones that everybody supports. Remember, the key to this process is making sure it's bottom up. If a leader or a team member tries to shove those ground rules down the team's throat, it's not going to work. But when team members come together to develop their own ground rules, those are the ones that stick. Imagine this. You're driving home, it's hot, your AC just broke, and it's sweltering. Then all of a sudden, to make matters worse, out of nowhere, this car comes and cuts you off. You're so mad, you're ready to tell them off, and then you look over and realize, oh, it's my girlfriend from the gym. Hey girl, how you doing? In an instant, your whole disposition changes. Why? The situation didn't change, but your perspective shifted because you have a relationship with the person. The same is true in the workplace. Relationships make a tremendous difference in our ability to work well together. Strong relationships don't just mean you'll enjoy working together more, although that helps, but it also means you're more likely to take extra time to help someone with a task or explain something, or maybe be transparent and admit that you don't understand something. You tend to give them the benefit of the doubt if there's an odd communication, and conflict tends to be resolved much easier. So how do we build those relationships? Plan to use an incremental approach, infusing relationship building slowly and consistently into your team events. Yes, having a one-day team retreat, a happy hour, or participating in a group volunteer event is awesome. But also think about small ways that you can infuse this relationship building into your normal everyday tasks. Here are a couple of my favorites. During meeting introductions, ask each person to share their first paid job or some other little known fact. It doesn't just infuse a bit of levity and identify points of commonality among team members, it can also break down those hierarchical barriers. After all, when you find out that your VP used to bag groceries at Piggly Wiggly just like you, it creates a real sense of connection. Here's another idea. Years ago, when I worked for a major tech company, they had something they called Bagel Thursdays. It just meant that every Thursday at 2:00, everybody in the office stopped what they were doing and they went to this one conference room where there would be a few bags of bagels, cream cheese, and jelly. We would just grab a bagel and chat randomly for about 20 minutes. Invariably, I bump into someone from a completely different department and learn a lot about a new project coming down the pipeline, or maybe catch up with someone that I hadn't seen in a while. It was so simple, but it was a great way to reinforce those connections on a regular basis. Remember, you can't microwave relationship building with just a one-day retreat. Instead, think about ways to strengthen those relationships just a little bit every day. Let's face it, we all know people who we can email for days, but we won't really get a response until we pick up the phone and call them. Or maybe it's the opposite. They'll be slow to respond by phone, but if you email or text them, you get an immediate response. The simple fact is that most of us are hardwired with a preferred communication mode, typically either face-to-face, phone, email, or text. While our natural tendency is to default to our preferred communication mode, the truth is that most people respond more quickly and more fully if we use their mode. So, how do you find that out? Just ask. It sounds super simple, but it's not what typically happens. Too often, we just keep emailing and wondering why we're not getting a quick response. When you learn each person's preferred mode and their general communication pet peeves, collaboration becomes so much easier and more effective. Here's a simple but powerful technique that you can use with your team. I call this the 4 walls communication activity. To get started, label each wall with a different communication mode: face-to-face, phone, email, or text. Then ask each person on the team to walk to the wall that represents their preferred mode. Now, once they're in those groups, ask each group to discuss, then share with the larger group why they prefer that mode and what some of their pet peeves are. The email group, for example, may bring up problems that arise when someone emails a request to multiple people, but nobody knows who's actually working on it. Or the text group might say that they really hate people just popping up in their queue with a quick question and really would prefer a text. This process is a great way to quickly and easily identify each person's preferred mode and better understand their individual communication pet peeves. I've found this activity to be an extremely powerful technique to enhance collaboration with any team. This type of clarification can make a huge difference, not just for task completion, but also in terms of how well the team gels and gets along. These days, most teams can't collaborate effectively without embracing a range of tools. In particular, as more and more teams have team members who work virtually, these tools are becoming essential for scheduling meetings, managing tasks and projects, and yes, just for collaborating each and every day. The great news is that there are so many tools to choose from. The bad news? There are so many tools to choose from. It's easy to become inundated by different tools, so don't go tool crazy, but do select the tools that will enhance your team's effectiveness. So what types of tools might your team need? Tools can provide so many different features and functionality. Let's just point out a few significant ones. Content or knowledge management systems can provide a central online repository that the team can use to share information, manage documents, control versions, etc. When you implement a content management system, make sure you leverage its features to make operations more efficient. Here's an example. One of my favorite content management system features was something that I called virtual nagging. This feature saved me so much time as a project manager. Instead of spending my days constantly calling or emailing colleagues to get status on their tasks, our team just agreed to use the tool's notification feature that would automatically request a status update from the owner either 24, 48, or 72 hours before the task due date. Team members were then expected to click the link and update the action item database themselves. The tool essentially acted as a virtual admin, helping me kind of nudge those tasks forward. Anyone who's tried to coordinate calendars to schedule a meeting knows that that can be a nightmare. As a result, calendaring systems can be extremely helpful. Another great set of tools are those for polling or surveying. These are great, inexpensive, user-friendly tools that will not just poll the group, but also provide reports if needed. Last but not least, video conferencing. It's become an essential collaboration tool. Of course, we've now got great options. Pick a platform that works best for your team's needs. But don't make the mistake of thinking that any tool is going to do the collaboration work for you. Remember, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So the team still has to pull together to do the real work of establishing a highly collaborative environment. As the saying goes, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. We may laugh, but we do it all the time. We're working in the weeds to crank the work out, but not necessarily sticking our head up every now and then to analyze how things are going and identifying what might need to be changed. It's so important to develop some sort of debrief process to critically analyze what's working well and what the team could do differently. Actually, many different industries implement this sort of technique to encourage continuous improvement. In healthcare, they conduct M&M or morbidity and mortality sessions to enhance patient care outcomes. The military conducts after-action reviews to analyze what happened, why it happened, and how it could be done better in the future. And in professional sports, teams often review tape of the previous game before the next practice to critically analyze how they executed and what they should change going forward. Similarly, the best workplace teams periodically take a temperature check to identify what's working and what they should possibly change. While there's not one specific way to do this, one of my favorite techniques is simply debriefing team meetings. It might sound like this. You all, I think we should just check in periodically to look at what's working and what we could possibly do differently to see if we might need to make any minor adjustments or incorporate some best practices. So let's just go around and have each person share one thing that you think is working well and one thing that you think we should maybe do differently. One of the reasons why these check-ins are so necessary is that things are constantly changing. Team members might be cycling in and out, systems and processes might be changing, or teams may be now working on completely new projects. So whether it's quarterly, monthly, or even more often, be sure to find some way to check in with the team to be sure things are good. And if they're not, make a change. So remember, your team won't collaborate well by accident. I wish it were that easy, but usually it isn't. Instead, it takes deliberate effort and the adoption of just a few key best practices. Let's quickly review some of them. First, remember to take just 1 or 2 meetings to develop and document the who, what, why, where, when, and how for your team. Expect to hear differing assumptions, even disagreements during these meetings. But remember, that's a good thing. The earlier your team identifies its differences of opinion, the sooner the team can address them. Next, take some time to develop team ground rules. Don't make the mistake of assuming everyone has the same preferences or work style. Of course they don't. Develop team ground rules that establish clear expectations and reflect the personality and work style of your particular team. Never forget the importance of relationship building and find ways to integrate it into your day-to-day operations. This isn't just important at the team's inception, but later on, it's also important to discourage cliques. Take time to specifically discuss communication preferences with the team. You cannot have strong collaboration with poor communication. It just doesn't work that way because communication is too essential to the collaboration process. Remember that tools can dramatically streamline communication, task management, and other elements of collaboration, so use them. But my recommendation, use the fewest number of tools that sufficiently meet your team's needs. And finally, don't rest on your laurels. Be sure to check in with the team to figure out what's working and what might need to change. Team debriefs can be quick and effective. Use each of these techniques as your team is just forming, or even if you've been together for a while, you can still incorporate these and use them to enhance your team's effectiveness.